Okay, and we're live. So today's guest is Kabir Mathur, co-founder and CEO at Leen. Kabir, it's great to have you on, dude. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. So we had the opportunity to meet RSA very briefly, which was fun. First of all, yeah, how did you guys find RSA?
It was great. We are in this phase where we're primarily selling to other security vendors, so it was kind of like Disneyland for us as a company. And there were so many fo great folks that we talked to. We spoke to some of our existing investors, some of our existing customers, and I thought it was a very well organized conference. I don't come from the security world, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Um, and it was my first time there, and I was very impressed.
Yeah, awesome. Will you guys be at Black Cat in a few weeks' time?
Yes.
You will.
Yes, we plan to be there. We don't have a booth yet because we're still a small company, but we will be there and we'll be taking meetings with again similar types of people, our customers, our investors, uh, talking to new prospects, of course, as well.
Yeah, nice. We're hosting actually a couple of events, so I'll have to send you the links. It'd be good to connect again there. But
Absolutely.
yeah, before we jump in, are you able to just give the audience a quick summary of who you are and the problem that Lean solves?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Kabir, as Stefan mentioned. I'm the CEO and one of the three co-founders of Lean. My co-founders are Akash and Neil. We've been working together as a team for about a year and a half and came up with the idea for Lean about a year ago. So officially, this version of the company, it's been about a year. But a little bit about me, I've been in the startup space for 15 years now. I've spent time in a variety of different industries, gaming, ad tech. Most recently, I was at a B2B SaaS company called Typeform, where I was leading product partnerships for them. And in product partnerships, of course, you have to build a lot of technical alliances and the integrations around those. So I built a couple hundred of those in the last 2.5 or so years. So in one shape or form, I've been focused on this world of integrations, both in the B2B SaaS space and previous to that in the ad tech space, which is very relevant based on what we're doing here at Lean. So the key problem we're solving at Lean is that there are just too many tools in the security space at this point. There's been this explosion of the industry, which is a good thing in a lot of ways, but of course it comes with its own problems where now there are close to 4,000 vendors. A lot of them are multi-product companies, so there are close to 10,000 products. And if you're either another security product company or you're an enterprise security team operating at scale, you have a really, really hard time consolidating your data. That involves connecting to the various tools in your stack or your customer's stack, cleaning up that data, so normalizing it in some way, correlating it, and only then does it become useful for your downstream workflows within your security program or your customer's security program. So my co-founder, Neil, used to work for an MDR, managed detection response and threat intelligence provider called Bluevoyant, where he led the whole data automation and orchestration platform. And he faced this problem firsthand because they were dealing with several hundred customers that all had varying security stacks. And it was his team that was responsible for building and maintaining tons of these integrations and then doing the data normalization. So that was when the kernel of the idea really hit him. And we as a company started on something completely different outside of security, which is a fun fact in itself. We were working on something in the AI space, didn't see much traction there. And then we decided to pivot to this idea. And luckily, so far, we've seen a lot more success with this version.
Yeah, nice. And we'll dive into the specifics around Lean later in the podcast. But firstly, just on that then, so a couple of questions. What took you to start up Lean with these guys?
So originally we came together to solve this other problem, and we were very passionate about it. It was an AI tool for customer success teams, and all of us were had varying experiences with customer success for various reasons, which I won't go into in this podcast because it could be its own kind of 30-minute slot. That didn't succeed. So because this idea had been in the back of Neil's mind for a while, we decided to go through the classical discovery journey that I'm sure many other founders go through as well, where we interviewed a bunch of people. For us, it was close to 100 folks in the security industry, ranging from CISOs down to security engineers. We also talked to founders of security companies. and realized that this was a common pain point. We started with a hypothesis because we didn't know that there was necessarily a business to be built here. And turns out that the pull from the market was really strong, particularly from the vendor segment, because they have this problem where as new tools come out in the security space, they have to continue, and those tools start to get adopted, they have to build and manage those integrations with them, which comes at a really high opportunity cost because they could, instead of focusing their product and engineering resources on their core roadmap, they now have to divert those resources to building and maintaining integrations. And it's a never-ending battle because these APIs keep changing, there's new products coming out. And that was really the inspiration when we kept hearing that theme for us to pursue this idea of building a unified API and data fabric for security.
Sure. And on that point as well, with vendors now looking at platform plays, right? And vendors having multiple products in their offering, this just exaggerates it even further, right? With the 4,000 vendors and more products coming to the market. So it's a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the platformization theme is really interesting. And in some ways, it solves the problem. If you're the type of security team that is satisfied with all the solutions that Palo Alto or Microsoft or CrowdStrike offer to you, then great, because it's all kind of contained within that ecosystem. But from our experience, speaking to these folks in the security space, that's pretty rare because
Yeah.
especially when you're operating at scale, you might have few dozen security tools in your stack and they don't all play nice with each other. And ultimately you do end up adopting something that's outside of those walled gardens. And that's where a company like ours could potentially be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And how are you enjoying security so far since you moved into the space? Like first time in the space for the last year or so. How are you finding things?
It's great. It's been kind of the theme of my career to every 4 or 5 years experience something different. It's a challenge I truly enjoy to learn about different industries, and I approach security the same way. I will say it's potentially more complex than some of the other ones that I've worked in before, but once you understand the key levers, the key players, and of course Neil, my co-founder, was a great guide through this whole journey for me. But I think it's a great industry. There are a lot of smart people working in the space, and I think what I like is that there's a lot of cooperation in the space, right? Because ultimately, it's everyone working in security versus the bad guys, and I feel like that mentality, even if people don't say it that often, is pretty pervasive across the industry, and people genuinely do want to help each other
Yeah.
and try and come up with innovative solutions that ultimately make all of these companies and cyber assets more secure.
Yeah, for sure. And was this your first time co-founder gig at Lean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've only ever worked for startups, but this is my first company that I'm starting myself.
How's that transition been? How have you found that?
Oh, it's amazing. I wake up energized and feeling grateful every day. It's in many ways a privilege to be able to do it. I joked that this was going to be the only professional outcome after working for other people's startups for 15 years that was going to make me happy to start my own thing. So it's a goal I've had for a long time. So to be able to fulfill it, especially to do it with a great team and work on a really interesting problem, it's fantastic. I have no complaints, as hard as the journey can be sometimes.
Yeah. Was there out of interest, was there a moment for you it just kind of clicked? Like obviously you had the aspirations of always wanting to do something yourself, but was there a moment you're like, okay, now's the right time, or did it naturally just kind of over time just fall into place with the other co-founders?
Yeah, I think it just fell into place. That a lot of things have to. I think you speak to any startup founder and they'll tell you that luck plays a really important part in any sort of successful journey. And by no means are we a successful company yet. We're still very young, but of the things that have gone well for us so far, including finding each other as a team, yeah, some of the dominoes just fell into place at the right time where all three of us quit our jobs around the same time. We happened to be working on similar problems. We had complementary skill sets, decided to do some small projects together to see if we gelled and worked well together as a team, and sure enough, we did. And from there, we didn't look back and just started to continue working together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And let's talk lean then. So in terms of funding. You're VC backed, right? You've closed around this year, was it that you closed?
It was the end of last year. So we
Okay.
closed our pre-seed round of funding end of last year, around October.
Nice, awesome. So yeah, and it sounds like you've had some growth since RSA from what we're talking, right? So how's the team grown in the last sort of 6 months?
Yeah, so we're three co-founders, of course, on the founding team, and we since last October when we closed this round, we've grown to a team of 8 between here in the US, and we have a couple of folks in India as well. Everyone we've hired primarily is, of course, young and hungry and wants to work at a startup. They're all primarily on the technical side because we're building a very technical product. So we've hired a lot of developers. We have one data scientist on board as well. And yeah, all very sharp folks on the team.
Yeah, exciting times. And Lean's a new category within cyber, right? So there's going to be a whole lot of education around this. I guess starting with, are you able to talk to the audience around why you guys feel like this is the right time to introduce a product like this into the security market?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's a couple of different ways to answer it. I'll try my best to try and consolidate it. I think the key problem is what I shared, that there's just this explosion of tools and products within security. But if you dive one level deeper, what that really means for these security teams is that you have all of these different tools in your stack that have different perspectives on a finite set of assets that you're trying to protect, right? If you think about how security teams go about their jobs, they think about it in terms of entities. I need to protect identities in my environment. I need to protect data assets. I need to protect networks, devices, so on and so forth. It's not like there are hundreds of these classes. There are, or maybe if you're being generous, a dozen, 20 or so, but you could potentially have dozens of different tools in your stack that have different perspectives on these different entities within your environment. And these perspectives are expressed through data formats. So it essentially means that each of these vendors in your stack is producing data that looks different than the other vendor in your stack, for example. And it's someone's job on this team to clean up that data and normalize it and make it useful for your downstream workflows. And this problem has just been getting more and more severe as, of course, the company, the industry has continued to grow. So that's one of the reasons why we think this is the right time to introduce this idea to the security market. And there's a lot of analogies as well. If you look at how other markets have evolved. So I talk very often about companies like Segment or High Touch in the SaaS space, right? Where they solve the problem of customer data, which kind of has a similar pattern where customer data can live in a lot of different places. Your product analytics suite within your website has some data. Maybe your users fill out forms, so that data lives somewhere else. When they complete a transaction, maybe that data lives in Stripe or whoever your payment processor is. So companies like this came in and they consolidated all of that into a single record and said, okay, your customer data, it's all in one place. So you can query it, you can build workflows on top of it. And we think the time is right for a very similar concept to be introduced to the security space. That being said, I think data fabric, and I think one of the things I've learned about security is that there are a lot of acronyms, there are a lot of categories. I think it's a little early in security for teams to be buying a data fabric for the sake of a data fabric. You need to lead with a use case, and in our case, that use case that folks resonated with the most when we were doing these discovery calls was positioning ourselves as an integration platform for these vendors to work with so they can focus their energies on the things that truly differentiate them. And instead of figuring out all the nuances of working with these different products and their APIs and procuring NFR licenses, getting access to sandbox data, they offload all of that complexity to Leen. So the way I describe it is they build a single integration to Leen. We have all these connectors out of the box to the CrowdStrikes, the Tenables, the Sneaks of the world, and they get all of that out of the box functionality very easily.
Yeah, very cool. And did you say the solution is for both vendor and enterprise, or just vendor currently and will be enterprise?
Yeah, it's the latter. So we are currently selling primarily to the vendor segment within security because, as I mentioned, the need from this segment was the loudest and the clearest and the most urgent as we were speaking to them. But we definitely see a play for the enterprise security teams as well.
Mm.
There are a couple of use cases we're actively exploring as POCs with a handful of customers on that front. There's a lot more to come on that in the next few months, but yeah, absolutely. We want to serve both sides of the market as we grow and mature as a company.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and very cool. As you say, in my head, it's a clear problem space, right? There's all this data, and no one really knows actually probably where some of this data is landing, right? And the way you described it, the analogy you use is really clear and it makes a lot of sense. How do you guys see the product evolving from where you are now, maybe over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, again, using analogies to what has already happened in other segments of the software space, you look at how dev tools as a segment has evolved, right? And you have great companies like the Datadogs, the HashiCorps of the world that have created these suites of amazing developer tools for software engineers, so they don't have to do these sort of mundane tasks that honestly none of them enjoy doing. They can work on higher level, more interesting problems. Um, and I think something similar has not been done for the security space. As we were going through our discovery journey, one of the interesting trends that we noticed was that the composition of security teams is becoming much more engineering driven. And this is a trend that only seems to be accelerating. I haven't been in security for long, but from speaking to the folks that have been in the space for a couple of decades, they've told me that security teams used to be primarily composed of very non-technical folks. A lot of people that used to be responsible for governance and compliance were the first set of folks that first moved into the formal security role. So naturally, the products that evolved around that persona were non-technical in nature. They were largely GUI based and simple workflows that a non-technical user, a business user could set up. But I think there's that fundamental shift happening now where the persona of security engineers that actually have a software engineering background is becoming much more prevalent in security. And there is no dev tool suite for these folks. There is no middleware layer that they can interact with that abstracts a lot of this complexity and this mundane work, the menial work that they have to do, but they don't want to do. And that's the role that we see ourselves playing in the industry, where we become the suite of tools and allow these teams that are becoming more technical to build automations and a lot of internal apps on top of our data fabric.
Yeah, interesting. And so, which members of the security team could benefit from Lean's data fabric then?
The key persona that we want to lean into on the enterprise side is a security engineer. So they're the operators that we feel could benefit from something like this. Of course, the level above them, so a head of security engineering, head of cloud security, head of product security, folks like that. But the output of what these folks are able to create actually has, so there's the creator part of or the persona that could use something that like Lean, and then there's the consumer side, right? They could create very clean dashboards for their CISO to present to the board. So the CISO indirectly is a consumer of the output of something built on top of Lean. They could create custom GRC apps that their compliance team could benefit from. So I think it touches every part of the security organization, but the primary persona will be these more technical folks on the security engineering side.
Got you. And when you integrate with certain companies, personas that you're targeting, what do you do with that data then? How is that stored?
Yeah, so today the way we look at the data is we approach it on a category by category basis. As I was mentioning earlier, security has so many subcategories within it. So I think it's impossible to come up with one grand schema that can describe all of security data. We thought about that initially when we started the company, but we quickly realized that that's not a challenge that's worth pursuing. So we broke it down into its component parts. And what that means to us is we approach it on a category by category basis. So for example, we started by building connectors to vulnerability management vendors like Qualys and Tenable and Rapid7. Then we moved to EDR with CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, SEC, CSPM, email security, identity security are some of the other categories we are currently tackling. And what we do within each of these categories is we make sure that the data from each of these vendors looks exactly the same. So we go through this exercise of looking at their API documentation, finding the commonalities across the data, and putting it into a data model that is very easy for our customers to consume and ensure that no matter who the data is coming from upstream, it's going to look exactly the same to them. So this is very useful for the vendor segment in particular, because they might have 100 customers using CrowdStrike, 50 customers using SentinelOne, a few dozen using Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and they need all of that data to look the same so they can use it within their application in a predictable way. So that's the value proposition that we're offering at the moment, is this normalization by category.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And what does what's the growth plans look like for you guys at Leen for we've got 6 months left really of this year, but into next year as well?
Yeah, there are a lot of exciting things happening. We are up to about a dozen customers that we're actively working with, primarily on the vendor side. As I've mentioned, we have a healthy pipeline of other folks that we want to work with. As we bring live more and more integrations, we will have the opportunity to work with more vendors in the segment. So hopefully we'll end the year with many more customers, active customers as well. We are actively pursuing a few POCs on the enterprise side as well. So we will bring hopefully a couple of those live before the end of the year. And of course, to support this growth, we will likely hire a couple more people to join our team, maybe on the product side, maybe a couple more engineers. Yeah, that's what we have ahead of us in the next 6 months.
Yeah, interesting. And are you, because I haven't really done much research into the space, and I know it's a new category. Are there others trying to replicate what you guys are doing, or are you a first mover, or are there others already here acting?
Yeah, it's a pretty new category for security. I would say it's come about in the last couple of years or so. The most prominent example of a company that did something very similar to us is a company called Avalor that started out of Israel, and they got acquired for a pretty penny by Zscaler last year. And they took a very similar approach to the market, where this team had actually built a data fabric of sorts for marketing data, and they sold that company to Salesforce. So in many ways, they were replicating that motion and that type of product for security. So yes, that's the best example. There are a couple other companies that have started around the same time as us that are trying to do things in a similar way, or approach the problem from slightly different angles.
Yeah, super interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to following your journey because it's exciting. It's a new category. There's lots going on. You're growing your customer base, you're growing the team. There's lots of good things happening. So look forward to following that and hopefully connecting at Black Cat as well. Just before we wrap this up, Kabir, pleasure to have you on and appreciate you taking the time to chat more about Leen and where you guys are going. Anything that you wanted to finish up with or feel like we've missed in this conversation?
No, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. No, I think we've covered most things. If anyone listening to this podcast if this sounds interesting, I'm always happy to chat with folks about this space. I'm still learning about it. So if anyone has a different perspective or use cases that they think a data fabric might be useful for, I'm all ears. If there are any vendors listening that we can help with integrations, we're always looking for talent to work with us as well. So if there's anyone listening here that thinks they can help our team as we grow, feel free to reach out. I'm easy enough to find on LinkedIn, and happy to have conversations with folks around any or all of this.
Absolutely. Awesome, dude. Well, thanks again for coming on. Look forward to connecting at Black Cat and speak again soon.
Likewise. Thanks a lot, Stefan.
Thanks, man.